The emergency beacon pierced through the void of space like a dying scream. Ambassador Kethvar of the Galactic Council gripped the edges of his command chair as the holographic display flickered to life before him. His 3 hearts hammered against his chest plates as the message began to play. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force vessel, Defiance. We are transmitting this warning to all Council members. The NIGMA Empire has begun their assault on Earth. This will be our final communication. The transmission crackled with static, but Chen's voice remained steady despite the chaos visible behind her. Explosions lit up the bridge of her ship in orange flashes. Her dark hair was matted with sweat, and a thin line of blood traced down her temple, but her eyes burned with fierce determination. "Tell them we tried to warn them," she continued, her voice growing softer but no less intense. "Tell them what happens when you poke a sleeping giant." The transmission cut to black. Kethvar stared at the empty space where the hologram had been, his scaled hands trembling. Around him, the bridge of the Council flagship Harmony buzzed with nervous energy. His crew, a mixture of species from across the galaxy, exchanged worried glances. "Sir," his communications officer, a insectoid Zexty named Click, spoke up. "That was transmitted 3 standard hours ago. Long-range sensors show nothing from the Sol system." "Nothing?" Kethvar's voice was barely a whisper. "Complete radio silence, sir. No energy signatures, no fleet movements, nothing." Kethvar closed his 4 eyes and felt the weight of failure crushing down on him. For 6 months, he had tried to convince the NIGMA Empire to reconsider their invasion of Earth. The humans had been accepted into the Galactic Council only 2 years ago, after they had proven themselves capable of faster-than-light travel. They were young, energetic, and eager to join the galactic community, but they were also stubborn. Terrifyingly stubborn. The NIGMA Empire had demanded that Earth surrender its military forces and submit to imperial rule. It was standard procedure. For newly discovered civilizations, most species gladly accepted protection in exchange for autonomy. But the humans had refused. Not just their government, but every single human representative had stood up in the council chambers and said the same word. No. Emperor Theknos of the NIGMA Empire had laughed. His massive form, 12 feet tall and covered in biomechanical armor, had shaken with amusement. "One tiny planet thinks it can stand against an empire that spans 1,000 worlds?" Kethvar had tried to explain. He had studied the humans extensively during their integration into the council. There was something different about them, something the galaxy had never seen before. They called it stubbornness, but it was more than that. It was a refusal to accept defeat that bordered on insanity. They fought 2 global wars on their own planet, he had pleaded with the Emperor. They nearly destroyed themselves rather than submit to tyranny. They will not surrender, no matter the odds. But Theknos had dismissed his concerns. A primitive species with crude technology. My 3rd fleet alone could crush them. Now, staring at the empty holographic display, Kethvar wondered if he should have tried harder. Should have found better words, better arguments. Should have made them understand what they were walking into. "Sir," Click's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Long-range scouts are reporting something strange from the Centauri system. NIGMA ships are changing course. All of them. They're converging on a single point." Kethvar's eyes snapped open. "Show me." The main display shifted to show a tactical map of local space. Red dots representing NIGMA fleet elements were indeed moving, all of them streaming toward what appeared to be empty space at the edge of the system. "What's at those coordinates?" Kethvar demanded. His tactical officer, a reptilian saurian named Vex, worked frantically at her console. "Nothing on our charts, sir. It's just empty space between Centauri and Sol." "Then why?" Kethvar began, but his words were cut off by an urgent chime from the communications array. "Sir," Click's voice rose to an excited chittering. "We're receiving a transmission. It's from Earth." "Impossible." "You said there was radio silence." "There was, sir, but this isn't coming from Earth. It's coming from those coordinates where the NIGMA fleets are converging." Kethvar felt his blood turn to ice. "Put it through." The holographic display flickered and suddenly Captain Sarah Chen appeared before them again. But this wasn't the same transmission as before. She stood on what appeared to be the bridge of a ship, but it was unlike any human vessel Kethvar had ever seen. The walls seemed to pulse with energy, and strange symbols scrolled across displays in the background. "This is Captain Chen of the Earth Defense Force," she said, her voice calm and professional. "I'm transmitting this message to the Galactic Council as required by interstellar law. We are about to engage NIGMA Imperial forces in defense of our sovereign territory." She paused, and for just a moment Kethvar caught a glimpse of something in her eyes that made his 3 hearts skip a beat. It wasn't fear or desperation, it was anticipation. "We wanted on record that we offered them multiple opportunities to withdraw. They refused." Chen's lips curved into what humans called a smile, but there was nothing pleasant about it. "We are no longer responsible for what happens next." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the Harmony in stunned silence. "Sir," Vex whispered, her voice filled with awe and terror. "Sensors are detecting massive energy buildups at those coordinates. Whatever the humans are doing, it's unlike anything in our databases." Kethvar leaned forward in his chair. "How long until we can reach those coordinates?" "At maximum warp? 6 hours, sir." "Do it, and send a priority message to all council ships in the area. Tell them to converge on our position." "Sir?" Click looked confused. "The NIGMA Empire has over 500 ships at those coordinates. Our entire fleet in this sector is only 40 vessels. If we intervene..." "We're not going to intervene," Kethvar said quietly, his eyes fixed on the tactical display where red dots continued to stream toward that single point in space. "We're going to witness, and we're going to record everything. Because, somehow, deep in his hearts, Kethvar knew that whatever was about to happen would change the galaxy forever. The humans had tried to warn them. Now it was too late for warnings. Now came the lesson. Chapter 2. The Sleeper's Wake Admiral Jessica Torres stood in the command center of the Hidden Dawn, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the tactical display. Around her, the most advanced vessel humanity had ever constructed hummed with barely contained energy. The ship existed in a pocket of folded space-time, invisible to conventional sensors, and protected by technology that made their public fleet look like toys. "Admiral," called out Commander Liu from the sensor station, "NIGMA forces have taken the bait. All fleet elements are converging on the coordinates we provided. Estimated arrival in 47 minutes. Torres nodded without taking her eyes off the display. 500 red dots moved through space like predators circling wounded prey, never realizing they were walking into a trap 3 years in the making. "Status of the other Dawn ships? All 37 vessels report ready, ma'am. Crews are at battle stations." Torres allowed herself a small smile. 38 ships against 500. The odds were almost fair. "And our friends in the council?" "Ambassador Kethvar's ship is 6 hours out, along with the council observation fleet. Right on schedule." Perfect. Torres had specifically calculated the timing to ensure the council would arrive just as the engagement concluded. They needed witnesses to what was about to happen. The galaxy needed to understand that humanity's public face, their official military, was just the tip of the iceberg. The real military had been working in secret since first contact. "Admiral," Lieutenant Park called from the communications station. "Captain Chen reports that all public fleet elements have reached the rally point. She's ready to begin the performance." Torres finally turned away from the tactical display to look at her crew. They were young, most of them, but they had trained for this moment since childhood. The Dawn Project had identified them early, selected them for their intelligence, their reflexes, and most importantly, their ability to keep secrets. To the galaxy, humanity had stumbled into space travel just 5 years ago. In reality, they had been preparing for this encounter for over a century. "Remember," Torres said, her voice carrying clearly through the command center, "everything that happens in the next few hours will determine humanity's place in this galaxy. We are not just fighting for Earth. We are fighting for the right to exist as equals, not subjects." She moved to her command chair, settling into the familiar contours. Around her, dozens of displays showed the positions of ships, the status of weapon systems, and the energy signatures of technologies that officially didn't exist. "Begin Phase 1, she ordered. Light years away, Captain Sarah Chen received the coded signal and nodded to her crew. The bridge of the Defiance was cramped and utilitarian compared to the sleek command centers of the Dawn ships, but it served its purpose. It looked exactly like what the galaxy expected from humanity's primitive technology. "All ships," Chen broadcast on open channels, knowing the NIGMA forces would intercept every word. "Form defensive positions around the beacon. Remember, we're buying time for the evacuation of Earth." It was a lie, of course. There was no evacuation. Earth's population was safe behind defense shields that the galaxy couldn't even detect, let alone breach. But the NIGMA Empire needed to believe they were on the verge of victory. Overconfidence would be their downfall. The 24 ships of Earth's public fleet arranged themselves in a textbook defensive formation around what appeared to be a distress beacon. To any observer, it would look like a desperate last stand by an outmatched force. Chen checked her chronometer. The NIGMA fleet would arrive any moment. "Chen to all ships," she said over the tactical network. "Remember, we need to look convincing for about 10 minutes. Take damage, but nothing critical. And whatever happens, do not reveal our true capabilities until Admiral Torres gives the signal." Acknowledgements came back from her captains, voices tight with controlled excitement. Like her, they were all veterans of the Dawn Project. They knew what was really at stake. Space around them began to ripple as the first NIGMA ships dropped out of hyperspace. Emperor Theknos stood in the command chamber of his flagship Eternal Glory, watching the pathetic human formation on the main display. His biomechanical implants glowed with satisfaction as he counted the enemy vessels. 24 ships, he rumbled to his fleet commander. "This is what they send to stop an empire." Fleet Commander Yextar, a scarred veteran of a dozen conquest campaigns, studied the tactical data with more care. "My lord, their positioning is unusual. And why are they grouped around that beacon? Does it matter?" Theknos waved a massive hand dismissively. "Begin the attack. I want this over quickly so we can proceed to Earth." "At once, my lord." The NIGMA fleet spread out in attack formation, 500 ships forming a sphere around the tiny human force. Each NIGMA vessel was 3 times the size of the human ships, armed with weapons that had conquered civilizations across the galaxy. Chen watched the enemy ships take position and felt a familiar calm settle over her. This was the moment they had trained for, planned for, dreamed of. The moment when humanity would finally show the galaxy what they were truly capable of. "All ships, begin evasive maneuvers," she ordered. "Make it look good." The human ships scattered, like startled fish, their engines flaring as they tried to escape the closing trap. NIGMA weapons began firing, brilliant beams of energy reaching across space to strike at the fleeing vessels. The first human ship to take a hit was the Courage. Her captain, Martinez, allowed the enemy beam to overload his forward shields and scar his hull. Warning lights flashed on his bridge as he transmitted damage reports that were only half fabricated. "This is Courage," he called over the emergency channel. "Forward shields down. We're losing atmosphere on decks 4 through 6. More hits followed. The human ships twisted and turned, firing back with weapons that seemed pitifully weak compared to the NIGMA arsenal. Their shots barely scratched the enemy hulls, and their defensive fire was sporadic and poorly coordinated. To any observer, it looked like a massacre in slow motion. On the Hidden Dawn, Admiral Torres watched the performance with professional appreciation. Her captains were doing excellent work, selling the illusion of a desperate fighting retreat while actually suffering minimal damage. "NIGMA forces are fully committed," Commander Liu reported. "All 500 ships have moved into attack positions. They're completely focused on our public fleet." "Perfect." Torres stood and moved to the main tactical display. "Begin Phase 2. Bring us to full readiness." Throughout the Hidden Dawn, systems that had been dormant suddenly came online. Energy flowed through conduits made from materials that didn't exist in any public database. Weapons that operated on principles the galaxy had never seen began to charge. "All Dawn ships report ready for combat," Liu announced. Torres took a deep breath. Once she gave the next order, there would be no going back. Humanity would reveal its true strength to the galaxy, and everything would change. But that was the point. The galaxy needed to learn that humans were not prey. "Signal Captain Chen," Torres ordered. "Tell her it's time to drop the act." The message flashed across space in a tight beam communication that no NIGMA sensor could detect. On the bridge of the Defiance, Chen received the signal and smiled. "All ships," she broadcast to her fleet. "Phase 2 is a go. Show them what we're really made of." Across the human formation, ships that had appeared damaged and desperate suddenly straightened their flight paths. Their engines flared with new power, and their weapons swiveled toward the enemy with deadly precision. Emperor Technos watched in confusion as the fleeing human ships suddenly stopped running and turned to face his fleet. What are they doing? Do they think 24 ships can fight 500? He was about to find out that 24 was not the number he should have been worried about. In the pocket of folded space-time where they had been waiting, 38 Dawn ships began to decloak. Chapter 3. The Price of Arrogance. The first indication that something was wrong came from the sensor stations aboard NIGMA ships scattered throughout the attack formation. Technicians stared at their displays in confusion as energy signatures began appearing where empty space had been just moments before. "Fleet Commander," called out Sensor Chief Caltech aboard the Eternal Glory, his voice tight with uncertainty. "I'm detecting massive energy buildups at multiple points around our formation. The signatures are unlike anything in our databases." Fleet Commander Yextar moved quickly to the sensor station, his scarred face darkening as he studied the readings. In 30 years of conquest campaigns, he had learned to trust his instincts, and right now every instinct was screaming danger. "My lord," he called to Emperor Technos, "I recommend we pull back and reassess. These readings—" "Nonsense, Technos," rumbled from his command throne. 24 primitive ships cannot threaten this fleet. Continue the attack." But even as the Emperor spoke, space around the NIGMA formation began to shimmer and fold. Reality twisted in ways that made experienced spacers feel sick to their stomachs. And suddenly the darkness of space was filled with new stars. 38 ships materialized around the NIGMA fleet like avenging angels. The Dawn ships were beautiful, in the way that perfect predators are beautiful. Their hulls were smooth and organic-looking, as if they had been grown rather than built. Energy patterns flowed across their surfaces like living circuits, and their weapons arrays hummed with power that made nearby space itself vibrate in sympathy. "Impossible," breathed Emperor Technos, his biomechanical implants flickering as they tried to process what his eyes were seeing. Where did they come from? Admiral Torres stood in the command center of the Hidden Dawn, watching the NIGMA fleet's confusion with cold satisfaction. Around the pocket of space-time where her ship waited, her fellow Dawn vessels had formed a perfect sphere around the enemy formation. 500 NIGMA ships were now trapped between the 38 Dawn ships on the outside and the 24 public fleet vessels on the inside. "Fleet-wide channel," she ordered. Lieutenant Park nodded and opened communications to all 62 human ships. "This is Admiral Torres to all Earth Defense Force vessels." Her voice carried clearly through space, broadcast on frequencies that every ship in the system would receive. "You are witnessing the activation of Operational Dawn. All ships, weapons, free. Show them what happens when you underestimate humanity." The effect was immediate and devastating. The Dawn ships opened fire with weapons that operated on principles the galaxy had never seen. Beams of coherent gravitational force reached out to crush enemy hulls like tin cans. Projectiles that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously punched through shields that had never encountered anything they couldn't deflect. Energy weapons that manipulated the fundamental forces of matter turned enemy ships into expanding clouds of superheated plasma. But it wasn't just the advanced technology that shocked the NIGMA forces. It was the precision. Every shot fired by the human fleet found its target. Every maneuver was perfectly coordinated. The humans fought like a single organism with 62 bodies, each ship moving in perfect harmony with all the others. Captain Chen, aboard the Defiance, felt the familiar rush of combat as her ship's true capabilities came online. The weapon systems that had seemed so primitive moments before revealed themselves to be sophisticated pieces of theater. Her ship's real armaments were built into the hull itself, invisible until the moment they fired. "Target the command ship," she ordered her weapons officer. "Let's introduce ourselves to the Emperor." The Defiance fired a single shot. To external observers, it looked like a simple energy beam, but the technology behind it was anything but simple. The beam phased through the Eternal Glory's shields as if they weren't there and struck the massive ship's hull with surgical precision. The hit didn't destroy the flagship, that wasn't the point. Instead, it overloaded every system on the ship's bridge and sent a very specific message directly to Emperor Theknos' command throne. When the energy surge faded, the Emperor found himself staring at a holographic projection of Captain Chen. She was smiling, and the expression was somehow more terrifying than any weapon. "Hello, Your Imperial Majesty," Chen said politely. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. We tried to warn you, but you wouldn't listen. So now we're going to give you a practical demonstration of why that was a mistake." Theknos tried to speak, but found that his voice systems had been temporarily disabled by the electromagnetic pulse. All he could do was watch as the human captain continued. "Here's what's going to happen," Chen explained in the same conversational tone she might use to discuss the weather. "We're going to systematically destroy your fleet. Not because we have to. We could have ended this battle in the first 30 seconds if we wanted to. But because you need to understand something important." Around the NIGMA formation, Dawn ships continued their methodical destruction of the Imperial fleet. They moved like dancers, flowing around enemy fire with impossible grace while their weapons found targets with mechanical precision. Ships that had conquered worlds were reduced to scrap metal in seconds. "You see," Chen continued, "humanity has been watching the galaxy for a very long time. We know about your empire's expansion. We know about the species you've enslaved. We know about the worlds you've strip-mined and the civilizations you've destroyed." The Emperor's biomechanical implants flared as he struggled against the system lockdown, but the human technology was too sophisticated. He was forced to listen as his fleet died around him. "We chose to reveal ourselves because we thought maybe the galaxy was ready for something different. Maybe there was a chance for cooperation instead of conquest. But you had to go and prove us wrong, didn't you?" On the tactical displays throughout the NIGMA fleet, the situation was becoming clear with horrifying speed. Of the 500 ships that had entered the battle, over 200 were already destroyed or disabled. The remainder were fighting desperately, but their weapons seemed to have no effect on the human vessels. "The thing is," Chen said, her smile fading into something much more serious, "we really don't like bullies. And your empire is the biggest bully in this part of the galaxy." Fleet Commander Yextar, his own ship damaged but still functional, tried desperately to coordinate a response. But how do you fight an enemy that can appear and disappear at will? How do you target ships that seem to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously? "All ships," he broadcast on the fleet emergency channel, "concentrate fire on the largest human vessel. If we can take out their flagship—" His words were cut off as the hidden Dawn appeared directly in front of his ship. One moment there was empty space. The next moment, a kilometer-long vessel of impossible beauty was hanging motionless just outside his weapons range. Admiral Torres's voice came over his communication system, clear and calm. "Fleet Commander Yextar, this is Admiral Jessica Torres, Commander of the Earth Defense Force Strategic Reserve. Your Emperor can't speak right now, so I'm talking to you." Yextar stared at the human ship on his main display, trying to understand what he was looking at. The vessel seemed to shift and flow, as if it existed in multiple states of reality simultaneously. "You have exactly 1 minute to order your remaining ships to stand down and surrender," Torres continued. "If you refuse, we will continue this demonstration until your fleet no longer exists." "Never!" Yextar snarled into his communicator. "The NIGMA Empire does not surrender to primitive—" He never finished the sentence. The hidden Dawn fired a single shot that passed through his ship's shields, hull, and superstructure without damaging any of them. Instead, it targeted the specific neural pathways in his brain that controlled speech, rendering him temporarily mute. "I'm sorry," Torres said politely, "but we've heard enough Imperial rhetoric for one day. Since you won't listen to reason, we'll proceed with the practical demonstration." The remaining Dawn ships moved with renewed purpose. Where before they had been methodically destroying the NIGMA fleet, now they became surgical in their precision. Ships were disabled rather than destroyed, their crews left alive but helpless as their vessels' systems failed around them. Emperor Theknos watched from his paralyzed flagship as the pride of his empire was systematically dismantled by a force he had dismissed as primitive. The humans weren't just defeating his fleet, they were toying with it, demonstrating capabilities that shouldn't exist. How long had they been hiding this technology? How long had they been watching and waiting? And more importantly, what else were they capable of? The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted exactly 18 minutes. When it was over, the NIGMA Empire's invasion fleet existed only as floating wreckage and disabled hulks. Not a single human ship had been seriously damaged. Captain Chen's image appeared once more on the Eternal Glory's command deck, but this time she was joined by Admiral Torres. Together they represented the public and hidden faces of humanity's military might. "Emperor Theknos," Torres said formally, "you are hereby charged with crimes against galactic peace, attempted genocide, and violation of sovereign territory. Your surviving crews will be treated according to the standards of civilized warfare, which is more than your empire has ever offered its victims." The paralysis holding the Emperor began to fade, and he found his voice once more. This is impossible. Our intelligence said you had only just achieved faster-than-light travel. Your technology should be centuries behind ours." Chen and Torres exchanged a look that somehow managed to be both amused and pitying. "Your intelligence was wrong," Chen said simply. "We've been capable of interstellar travel for over a century. We've been watching your empire expand for decades, and we've been preparing for this meeting for years. But why?" Theknos demanded. "Why reveal yourselves now? Why not remain hidden?" Admiral Torres stepped forward, her expression growing serious. "Because the galaxy deserves better than empires built on conquest and slavery. Because there are civilizations out there that need protection from bullies like you. And because it's time for humanity to take its place as a galactic power." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "We tried to do this the diplomatic way. We offered cooperation, trade, mutual defense pacts, but you chose conquest instead. You chose to see our desire for peace as weakness." Around them, the wreckage of the NIGMA fleet drifted in space like a monument to imperial arrogance. "So now you know the truth," Torres continued. "Humanity is not weak, we are not primitive, and we will not be conquered." In the distance, sensor displays began showing new contacts approaching the battlefield. The Galactic Council observation fleet was arriving right on schedule, ready to witness the aftermath of the NIGMA Empire's defeat. The galaxy was about to learn that the balance of power had just shifted dramatically, and humanity was no longer the junior partner in galactic civilization. Chapter 4. The New Balance Ambassador Kethavar stood frozen on the bridge of the Harmony, staring at the tactical display in absolute silence. Around him, his mixed-species crew worked with the quiet efficiency of beings in shock, cataloging and recording everything they were seeing. The coordinates where 500 NIGMA ships had converged now looked like a graveyard. Twisted metal, drifted in expanding clouds of debris, interspersed with the hulks of disabled vessels whose crews were still alive, but whose ships would never fly again. And moving through this devastation with calm precision were 62 human ships. Ships that, according to every intelligence report, should not have been capable of this level of destruction. "Sir," Click chittered nervously from the communication station. "We're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. It's Admiral Torres." Kethavar closed his 4 eyes and took a steadying breath. In his long career as a council diplomat, he had handled first contact with dozens of species, negotiated trade agreements across half the galaxy, and prevented 3 major wars through careful mediation. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. "Put her through," he said quietly. The main display shimmered, and Admiral Jessica Torres appeared before them. She stood in what was clearly the command center of a very advanced warship, surrounded by technology that shouldn't exist. Her expression was professional, but not hostile, the look of someone who had just finished a distasteful but necessary job. "Ambassador Kethavar," she said with a slight nod of acknowledgement. "Thank you for coming so quickly. We have quite a bit to discuss." Kethavar found his voice after a moment of struggle. "Admiral Torres, we monitored the engagement. The Council fleet recorded everything. Good. That was the point." Torres stepped closer to the camera pickup, and Kethavar could see the weight of responsibility in her eyes. "Ambassador, I want you to understand something clearly. What happened here today was not a display of human aggression. It was a response to an unprovoked invasion of our sovereign territory. I understand that, Admiral, but the scale of how is this possible? Our intelligence reports indicated that your species had only achieved faster-than-light travel 5 years ago." Torres smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Your intelligence reports told you what we wanted them to tell you. The truth is, humanity has been capable of interstellar travel for over a century. We've been watching the galaxy, learning about its politics and powers, and preparing for the day when we would need to reveal ourselves." The implications hit Kethavar like a physical blow. "You've been watching us for a century." "We had, too," Torres replied simply. "When we first detected faster-than-light communications and realized we weren't alone in the galaxy, we faced a choice. We could announce ourselves immediately and hope for the best, or we could take the time to understand what we were getting into." She gestured to something off-camera, and the display split to show a series of images. NIGMA ships strip-mining a world, enslaved populations laboring under alien overseers, entire civilizations reduced to servitude. We chose to watch and learn, and what we learned convinced us that the galaxy was not ready for an unprepared humanity. So we prepared. Kethavar stared at the images, his 3 hearts sinking as he recognized the documentation of dozens of NIGMA conquests that the Council had been powerless to prevent. "The public face of humanity that you've known for the past 2 years," Torres continued, "was carefully crafted to present us as a young, energetic species that could contribute to galactic civilization. Everything from our ship designs to our diplomatic positions was calculated to make us seem harmless but valuable. And the truth? The truth is that we are neither harmless nor helpless. We are a species that has survived 2 global wars, multiple near extinctions, and every challenge our home world could throw at us. We are stubborn to the point of insanity, and we do not surrender." The display shifted again, this time showing technical readouts of the Dawn ships. The energy signatures alone were beyond anything in Council records. "How?" Kethavar whispered. "A century of focused development tends to produce impressive results," Torres said. "When your entire species is working toward a single goal, preparing for contact with galactic civilization, you'd be amazed what you can accomplish." On the tactical display, the surviving NIGMA ships were being herded into formation by human vessels. Their crews would be treated as prisoners of war, their ships studied and catalogued, their intelligence networks unraveled. "What happens now?" Kethavar asked. "The NIGMA Empire will not accept this defeat quietly. They have over 1,000 worlds, fleets scattered across dozens of systems." "Yes, they do," Torres agreed. "Or rather, they did." The blood in Kethavar's veins turned to ice. "What do you mean?" Torres was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Ambassador, while we were dealing with their invasion fleet here, other human forces were dealing with their infrastructure. The NIGMA Empire, as a functioning political entity, ceased to exist approximately 6 hours ago." The bridge of the Harmony fell into complete silence. Even the ambient hum of the ship's system seemed muted. "You destroyed their empire? In 6 hours?" "Liberated," Torres corrected. "We destroyed their military command structure, their faster-than-light communication networks, and their governing bodies. The worlds they controlled are now free to choose their own destinies. The species they had enslaved are no longer enslaved. She leaned forward slightly, and Kethvar could see the exhaustion behind her professional demeanor. We didn't do this lightly, Ambassador. We spent decades preparing for this moment, calculating every move, anticipating every consequence. We knew that revealing our true capabilities would change everything, but the alternative was allowing the NIGMA Empire to continue its expansion unchecked. The Council will want explanations, Kethvar said weakly. There will be inquiries, investigations. Some species will see this as an act of aggression. And they would be wrong, Torres replied firmly. Everything we did was in response to direct military action against our territory. We offered the Empire multiple opportunities to withdraw peacefully. They chose war instead. The display showed new contacts appearing at the edge of the system, more council ships arriving to investigate the situation. Within hours, representatives from dozens of species would be demanding explanations. I want you to understand something, Ambassador, Torres said. Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy. We don't want to build an empire or conquer other species. What we want is simple, the right to exist as equals in a galaxy where might doesn't make right. And if the Council doesn't accept that? Torres was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her words carried the promise of absolute commitment. Then the Council will learn the same lesson the NIGMA Empire just learned. We are not asking for permission to exist, Ambassador. We are informing you that we do exist, and that we will defend ourselves and our allies against any threat. She stepped back from the camera pickup, and Kethvar could see other human officers working at stations behind her. They moved with the calm efficiency of people who had just completed a long-planned operation. Your ship and the other Council vessels are welcome to remain in the area and conduct whatever investigations you need. Torres continued. Our forces will cooperate fully with any reasonable inquiries, but understand that we are not going to apologize for defending ourselves, and we are not going to pretend to be something we're not. The transmission shifted to show Captain Chen, still aboard the Defiance. She looked tired but satisfied, like someone who had just finished a difficult but necessary job. Ambassador, Chen said, 3 years ago, when we first applied for Council membership, you asked me what humanity wanted from the galaxy. Do you remember what I told you? Kethvar did remember. The conversation had taken place in his private office aboard the Council station, and Chen's answer had stuck with him ever since. You said you wanted the chance to prove that cooperation was stronger than conquest. Exactly. And that hasn't changed. What happened here today was necessary to protect that possibility. The NIGMA Empire would have continued expanding, enslaving species, and destroying any chance for a galaxy based on cooperation rather than domination. Chen paused, and Kethvar could see the weight of command in her eyes. We stopped them because no one else could. But now that it's done, we want to go back to building something better. The question is whether the Council is ready to help us do that. The transmission ended, leaving Kethvar alone with his thoughts, and the impossible task of explaining to the galaxy that everything they thought they knew about humanity had been wrong. He turned to his communications officer. Click. Open a priority channel to the Council chambers. Tell them we need an emergency session. Full attendance. Yes, sir. What should I tell them the subject is? Kethvar looked out at the wreckage of what had once been the most powerful military force in this sector of the galaxy, now reduced to scrap metal and disabled hulks by a species the Council had considered barely capable of interstellar flight. Tell them, he said quietly, that we need to discuss the new balance of power in the galaxy. As the Harmony began transmitting emergency signals to Council worlds across the sector, Kethvar couldn't help but think about the conversation he'd had with Captain Chen 3 years ago. She had been so earnest then, so hopeful about humanity's place in galactic civilization. Now he understood that her hope had been backed by the kind of power that could reshape the galaxy in a matter of hours. The question was whether the rest of the Council would be wise enough to recognize that this power was being offered in partnership, not conquest, because after what he had witnessed today, Kethvar was absolutely certain that the galaxy had two choices: work with humanity or learn the same lesson the NIGMA Empire had just learned, and he very much hoped the Council would choose wisely. The Council chambers on Nexus Prime had never hosted a gathering quite like this one. Representatives from over 200 species filled the vast amphitheater, their voices creating a low murmur of conversation in dozens of languages. But despite the crowd, there was an unusual tension in the air, the kind of careful politeness that comes when everyone is still adjusting to a fundamental change in how the universe works. Ambassador Kethvar stood at his usual position in the diplomatic section, but his attention was focused on the human delegation. Admiral Torres sat in the chair that had once been reserved for NIGMA Empire representatives, her expression calm and professional. Beside her, Captain Chen reviewed notes on a tablet, seemingly unaware of the hundreds of eyes watching her every move. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of revelations, investigations, and careful negotiations. The full extent of humanity's hidden capabilities had slowly come to light through a series of carefully managed disclosures. The Dawn Project, the Century of Preparation, the network of hidden bases and advanced technologies, all of it documented, verified and presented to the Council with the kind of transparency that made it impossible to doubt. But more importantly, humanity had proven their stated intentions through actions. The liberated worlds of the former NIGMA Empire had been given genuine self-determination. Human forces had withdrawn as soon as local governments were established. No tribute was demanded, no puppet governments installed. For the first time in galactic history, a major power had conquered territory and then actually given it up. "The Council will come to order," announced Chancellor Vexpri, her reptilian features stern as she called for attention. "We are here today to vote on Resolution 2847, the formal recognition of humanity as a Tier 1 civilization, and their admission to the Council Security Board." The chamber fell silent. This was the moment that would determine humanity's official place in galactic civilization. Tier 1 status was reserved for species capable of projecting power across interstellar distances and contributing to galactic security. Only 12 species had ever achieved it. "Before we vote," the Chancellor continued, "Admiral Torres has requested the opportunity to address the Council." Torres stood smoothly and walked to the central podium. As she moved, Kethvar noticed something that would have been impossible 3 months ago. Representatives from dozens of species nodded respectfully as she passed. Fear and uncertainty had gradually given way to something closer to respect. "Members of the Galactic Council," Torres began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. 3 months ago, humanity revealed capabilities that shocked the galaxy. Today, I want to talk about why we developed those capabilities and what we intend to do with them. She gestured to a holographic display that appeared above the podium, showing a map of local galactic sectors. For over a century, we watched as the NIGMA Empire expanded through conquest and enslavement. We saw civilizations destroyed, species reduced to servitude, entire worlds strip-mined for resources. And we saw that the existing galactic community, despite its good intentions, lacked the power to stop them. The display shifted to show statistics: populations enslaved, worlds conquered, resources extracted through forced labor. We could have revealed ourselves then and asked for help, but we understood that asking for help is only meaningful if you're also capable of providing it. So we prepared. We developed the strength necessary to defend not just ourselves, but others who needed defending. A new image appeared: the liberated worlds of the former NIGMA Empire now showing signs of recovery and independent development. The results speak for themselves. 47 worlds are now free to choose their own destinies. 18 different species are no longer enslaved, and the expansion of conquest-based empire in this sector has ended. Torres paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "But here's what I want the Council to understand. We didn't do this to prove our strength. We did it to prove that strength can be used for something other than domination. Every capability we revealed, every technology we demonstrated was developed with one goal in mind: creating a galaxy where cooperation is stronger than conquest." She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with representatives from dozens of species. Humanity requests Tier 1 status not because we want to rule, but because we want to serve. We want to be the shield that protects developing civilizations from predators. We want to be the force that stops the next NIGMA empire before it can begin its expansion. The chamber was absolutely silent now. Even the translator devices seemed to hum more quietly. We understand that our methods were dramatic. We understand that revealing hidden capabilities and dismantling an empire in a matter of hours was shocking. But we also understand that sometimes shock is necessary to break old patterns and create space for new ones. Torres stepped back from the podium slightly, her posture relaxing into something more conversational. The galaxy has lived under the shadow of might makes right for too long. Empires rise through conquest, expand through force, and fall only when they encounter greater force. We want to break that cycle. We want to create a galaxy where might makes right, but where right means protecting the innocent, defending the weak, and preserving the freedom of all sapient species to choose their own destinies. She gestured to the human delegation, and Kethavar noticed that several other humans had joined them, scientists, diplomats, and what appeared to be civilian leaders. If the Council grants us Tier 1 status, we will use it to build the kind of galactic community we all claim to want. A community based on mutual defense rather than mutual threat. A community where developing species don't have to fear conquest, where established species don't have to choose between expansion and stagnation, and where the strong protect the weak instead of preying upon them. Torres returned to the podium and placed her hands on its surface, leaning forward slightly. But understand this clearly. We will pursue these goals with or without Tier 1 status. What happened to the NIGMA Empire wasn't a threat or a demonstration, it was a promise. Humanity will not allow conquest-based empires to threaten innocent species. We will not permit the strong to prey upon the weak, and we will not ask permission to defend ourselves or our allies. She straightened, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the absolute certainty that had become humanity's trademark. Question before the Council today isn't whether humanity deserves Tier 1 status. We've already proven our capabilities beyond any doubt. The question is whether the Council wants to work with us to build something better, or whether you prefer to maintain the status quo of competing empires and constant threat. Torres stepped back from the podium and nodded to the Chancellor. Thank you for your time and consideration. As she walked back to her seat, the chamber remained silent for nearly a full minute. Then Chancellor Vexipri called for the vote. All in favor of Resolution 2847? Lights began appearing throughout the chamber as representatives activated their voting systems. Kethvan watched the tally with fascination as species after species registered their support. The Zexti Collective voted yes. The Saurian Republic voted yes. Even the cautious Ethereal Assembly, known for their reluctance to support any change in galactic politics, voted yes. When the final tally appeared on the chamber's main display, it showed 847 votes in favor, 23 against, and 31 abstentions. Resolution 2847 passes by overwhelming majority, Chancellor Vexpri announced. Humanity is hereby recognized as a Tier 1 civilization and granted full membership on the Council Security Board. The chamber erupted in something that wasn't quite applause, but wasn't quite relief either. It was the sound of a galaxy acknowledging that everything had changed. As representatives began filing out to spread the news to their homeworlds, Kethavar made his way over to the human delegation. Admiral Torres was speaking quietly with Captain Chen and several other humans, but she looked up as he approached. "Congratulations, Admiral," Kethavar said, "though I suspect this outcome was never really in doubt." Torres smiled, the first genuinely relaxed expression he'd seen from her since the battle 3 months ago. "Actually, Ambassador, it was very much in doubt. Not the vote itself, but whether the Council would choose partnership or suspicion. We could have forced recognition of our capabilities, but we wanted genuine cooperation. And now? Now we build something better," Captain Chen said, joining the conversation. "The easy part was stopping the NIGMA Empire. The hard part is proving that there's an alternative to the cycle of empire and conquest." Kethvar looked around the chamber, watching representatives from hundreds of species discussing this new reality. Some were excited, some were worried, but all of them were talking about the future instead of merely trying to survive the present. You know, he said thoughtfully, 3 years ago, when you first applied for council membership, I thought humanity's greatest strength was your optimism, your belief that the galaxy could be better than it was. And now? Torres asked. Now I understand that your optimism was backed by the will and capability to make it reality. That's actually quite terrifying and quite hopeful at the same time. Chen laughed, and the sound was surprisingly light given the weight of everything that had happened. Welcome to being human, Ambassador. We've been living with that combination of terror and hope for our entire existence. It's what makes us who we are. As Kethvar watched the human delegation prepare to leave the chamber, he found himself thinking about the galaxy's future. For the first time in his long diplomatic career, he was genuinely optimistic about it. The age of conquest was over. The age of cooperation was about to begin, and humanity, the species that had spent a century preparing for this moment, was ready to help build it. The galaxy would never be the same. But perhaps, Kethvar thought as he watched Admiral Torres shake hands with representatives from a dozen different species, that was exactly what it needed. The warning had been given. The lesson had been taught. Now came the harder task of building something worthy of the sacrifice. But if any species was stubborn enough to see it through, it was humanity. The end.